My vás tady vítáme na konferenci. Dobrý den.
Dobré ráno na České zemědělské univerzitě v Praze.
A poprosíme potom o nějaký signál, kdyby jsme nebyli slyšet, kdyby cokoliv bylo za problém, tak prosíme napište nám do chatu, sledujeme chat a sledujeme i konferenční e-mail. Takže teď bychom vás chtěli poprosit, abyste jakékoliv technické problémy nám hlásili buď do chatu nebo do konferenčního e-mailu a měli byste slyšet překlad do angličtiny a pokud ne, tak také nám prosím nahlašte, že se vám nedaří slyšet překlad. Teď byste mě měli slyšet přeloženého i do angličtiny.
Tak a abyste mohli sledovat právě, když bude buď v angličtině, nebo naopak zase v češtině, tak dole, jak máte účastníky, chat, šerování, tam asi nemáte, nahrávání a je tam interpretation. Tak tam, když klepnete, tak pro češtinu, to znamená, abyste slyšeli překlad do češtiny, tak je to German. Bohužel, nešlo to jinak nastavit. A pokud chcete angličtinu, tak do angličtiny, English.
So if you would like to change language, it's down in your screen, interpretation, and you can find English, and then you will be able to have this translation. So test it if it's okay, and enjoy conference. Okay. Thank you for your feedback. Takže my děkujeme zahraničním účastníkům za zpětnou vazbu do chatu. To nás velmi uklidňuje, že vidíme, že vám to funguje. Takže můžeme začít. Kdyby kdokoliv jste cokoliv potřebovali, tak sledujeme konferenční e-mail konference@gmail.com, který máte na stránkách, který můžete kdykoliv vlastně využít. A i jakkoliv jinak nás kontaktujte, když byste cokoliv potřebovali. Hlavně prosíme řečníky dnešní, kteří dneska budou vystupovat, aby si zkontrolovali, že mají přístup od nás v e-mailu do Zoomu, že mají vlastně všechny přístupové údaje a když tak nám napište taky na konferenční e-mail. Děkujeme vám a tímto bychom mohli zahájit konferenci dnešní. A já vás tady teda vítám, jmenuji se Petr Chaluš a budu tady s Jitkou moderovat tuhle konferenci. A čeká nás tedy dlouhý den až do 16:30. Tu dneska budeme s přestávkami. Snažíme se aktualizovat program, když můžete sledovat i aktuality na webu www.konferencekp.cz a v těch aktualitách máte teď zrovna pozvánku na networking, můžete se přidat do facebookové skupiny konference nebo si můžete vybrat LinkedIn skupinu konference a můžete také přidat do online sdíleného dokumentu, vlastně si najít na stránkách potom vstup a říct nám tam něco o sobě, seznámit se. To vám ještě postupně během dne zkusíme znova připomenout, abyste se mohli kontaktovat mezi sebou.
Tak já vás tady chci přivítat i za Českou zemědělskou univerzitu a za náš institut vzdělávání a poradenství, který normálně sídlí v Malé Chuchli. A my jsme velmi rádi, že se nám podařilo takto zvládnout přípravu na konferenci, která je v tomto směru netradiční, protože poprvé je v online prostoru, takže nám držte palce, abychom to zvládli, aby vše fungovalo a konference se podařila jako vždycky, dosud se dařilo. Tak a já si myslím, že nastává čas, abychom dali slovo našim úvodním řečníkům a já hned začnu s naším panem ředitelem od nás z Institutu vzdělávání a poradenství, panem doktorem Němejcem, takže tímto já mu předávám slovo.
Dobré ráno všem, děkuji. Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, já bych vás velmi rád uvítal, ač na virtuální půdě České zemědělské univerzity jménem pana rektora, pana profesora Petra Skleničky a na půdě Institutu vzdělávání a poradenství České zemědělské univerzity jménem svým a jménem svých kolegů. Pan rektor a ostatní členové úzkého vedení univerzity se z tohoto setkání omlouvají, protože shodou okolností se zabývají jinými aktivitami napříč sítí evropských univerzit pro živé vědy. Já, tak jak již bylo řečeno, tak i já jsem velmi rád, že se toto setkání podařilo uskutečnit a těší mě i to, že se setkání podařilo uskutečnit právě na půdě České zemědělské univerzity v Praze, protože si myslím, že problematika kariérového poradenství a poradenství vůbec nám není cizí. Mohu například zmínit to, že při České zemědělské univerzitě v Praze funguje kariérní centrum, které má svoji tradici a které se napříč univerzitou zabývá současnými studenty, absolventy a tak podobně. Poskytuje odborné poradenství právě v problematice volby kariéry anebo svého dalšího směřování, například po zakončení studií. Dále si myslím, že je důležité zmínit i to, že Institut vzdělávání a poradenství při České zemědělské univerzitě v Praze se zasloužil o určitý unikát, protože od tohoto akademického roku zcela nově vyučujeme bakalářský studijní program kariérové poradenství a vzdělávání. Při jehož absolvování absolventi obdrží kvalifikaci kariérový poradce. Já si myslím, že toto by mohlo stačit na úvod za Českou zemědělskou univerzitu v Praze a za Institut vzdělávání a poradenství a tímto bych rád úplně všem popřál příjemně strávený čas na konferenci, ale nejen příjemně, ale také přínosně. Ať se daří. Děkuju.
My moc děkujeme za milá a krásná slova panu řediteli. A předáme slovo dále.
Tak já bych poprosil, jestli by mohla nám říct pár slov na úvod Jana Malá. Jana Malá tady zastupuje vlastně naší milou instituci Ministerstvo školství, mládeže a tělovýchovy a spolupracujeme s ní velmi vlastně na odborné úrovni. Ona vlastně se zabývá kariérovým poradenstvím a těšíme se na její vstup. Tak předávám slovo a může kdykoliv začít mluvit. Jano.
Dobrý den, dámy a pánové. Já děkuji za milé přivítání. Děkuji za pozvání na konferenci a doufám, že teď už byste měli vidět úvodní obrázek mé prezentace. A já jsem byla požádána, abych vám řekla něco o prioritách Ministerstva školství, mládeže a tělovýchovy v oblasti kariérového poradenství. Jak všichni dobře víte, vy, kteří se dnes účastníte konference z České republiky, v tomto roce spatřila světlo světa strategie vzdělávací politiky České republiky do roku 2030. Byl to velmi očekávaný a stal se velmi kontroverzním dokumentem, ale je na světě. A já bych se s vámi ráda podělila o to, jakým způsobem je tam pojato právě kariérové poradenství. Je tam specifický cíl, který se jmenuje posílit kariérové poradenství spolupráci se zaměstnavateli, rezorty a dalšími partnery. Ta představa ministerstva je taková, že v rámci revizí rámcových vzdělávacích programů bude zaměřena pozornost na to, aby se opravdu systematicky pracovalo na kariérovém rozvoji každého žáka, aby byla posilována jeho profesní identita a vazba s oborem vzdělávání. To by mělo přispět k tomu, že se omezí předčasné ukončování studia, které je bohužel trendem na všech stupních vzdělávání. Netýká se to jen základních nebo jen středních škol, ale je to vidět i na vysokých školách. A také, aby se zamezilo tomu, čemu se říká cestování mezi obory. To znamená, to kariérové poradenství by mělo pomoci zvolit tu správnou kariérní cestu každému žákovi. Pozornost by měla být zaměřena nejenom na roli poradenství ve školách, ale také na rozvoj dovedností pedagogů, podporovat žáky v dokončování studia a v rámci jejich přechodu na trh práce. Ta idea je taková, aby v každém předmětu každý pedagog dokázal žákům vysvětlit, jak jeho předmět může prospět jejich budoucí kariéře.
Dobrý den, paní Malá, já mám prosbičku. Jestli náhodou jste neklepla do toho interpretation, dejte si off, ať tam nemáte angličtinu nebo German, ať je tam off, protože mluvíte nám do druhého kanálu, prosím. Děkuju.
Omlouvám se.
Že nám to ruší zahraniční překlad. Jo, v tom nastavení off dát.
Já tady vůbec nevidím tu variantu interpretace.
Úplně dole, účastníci chat a dole interpretation. Je taková...
Ne, nemám. Já to vidím úplně, já to přestanu sdílet, omlouvám se. Interpretace. Off mám takže teď je to lepší.
Zaškrtnout off. Tak.
To mám zaškrtnuté. Mám zaškrtnuté off a pod tím mám ještě English a German.
Takže jo, tak už by mělo být správně. Omlouvám se za takovou technický vstup, že se rušily 2 kanály. Děkujem. Takže můžete pokračovat. Omlouvám se.
Já také se omlouvám, pokud došlo k nějakému rušení tlumočníkům. Omlouvám se vám. A tady jenom bych chtěla zdůraznit, že v rámci své gesce se ministerstvo zaměřuje na podporu zejména počátečního vzdělávání neboli těch škol, na které dosáhne, to znamená, to jsou základní, střední a vysoké školy, které jsou poskytovateli kariérového poradenství v České republice. Co je pro nás velmi důležité, to jsou kritické podněty, které se ozývají a které, doufám, nezůstanou nevyslyšeny. Vnímáme, že z řad kariérových poradců a lidí, kteří se v této oblasti pohybují, se ozývá požadavek na zajištění dostatečné dostupnosti poradenství přímo ve školách. Také na průběžné zlepšování kvality poradenství na všech úrovních vzdělávacího systému, tedy od předškolního vzdělávání až po vysokoškolské. A zejména požadavek na ukotvení pozice kariérového poradce ve školách. Tady možná, pokud tu máme zahraniční hosty, vidíte rozdíl mezi tím, jak je to u nás a jak je to v Evropě. Protože u nás kariérové poradenství je stále ještě vnímáno trochu jako záležitost nová, přestože to tak není. Ale já chci říct něco, co je velmi důležité, že v tuto chvíli důležitost kariérového poradenství v celoživotní perspektivě je nespochybnitelná. To, že kariérové poradenství je potřeba, je věc, kterou už v tuto chvíli opravdu nikdy nikdo nebude zpochybňovat. Já bych chtěla hrozně moc poděkovat vám všem, kteří se věnujete poradenství, protože vím, že pro vás to není práce, není to zaměstnání, ale je to poslání a je to srdeční záležitost a je to něco, čím žijete. A vaši klienti, ať už jsou to žáci a studenti, anebo dospělí, tohle to vnímají a oceňují to. Já bych vám chtěla popřát přínosnou konferenci a zároveň pogratulovat všem vítězům Národní ceny kariérového poradenství za rok 2020. Takže děkuji mnohokrát.
Moc děkujeme a budeme doufat, že opravdu i na úrovni školy kariérové poradenství bude mít své místo pevné, jako i ostatní pozice.
Já doufám, že mi funguje mikrofon. A děkujeme a poprosil bych pana Cohena Nomdena, if you can start, Cohen.
Yeah, hello, good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much also for having invited the European Commission to speak a few words during this opening session. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to say a few words. So, since the start of the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen that lifelong learning is more and more something that is taking place in the digital space. And this has, of course, a lot of challenges, including for career guidance. I would like to point to the European Skills Agenda that was adopted by the Commission on the 1st of July. And the Skills Agenda sets out a strategy on European skills policies for the next 5 years. And this is done because skills are and will be key drivers for economic recovery needed to get out of the current crisis, to strengthen competitiveness, but also resilience of our societies. strongly anchored in EU employment policy, the European Skills Agenda is an element of coordinated effort at European and national level between governments, employers, social partners, and education and training stakeholders, with the aim to achieve the European Green Deal, to put in practice industrial and small and medium-sized enterprises strategy, to develop the EU digital strategy, and to achieve a European education area. And in the middle of the corona crisis, the European Skills Agenda is calling for all stakeholders to join forces for skills, to ensure that skills are fit for jobs, to provide people with tools for lifelong skills development, and to unlock the investment potential of the recovery plan for Europe to invest in the skills. So skills, we see skills at Commission level as part of the answer to recovery from the crisis, while harnessing also the digital and green transitions. So the need to get out of the crisis should not make us forget the challenges we have in making the green and digital transitions. Now, skills and career guidance are, of course, intrinsically linked. And there is no, however, European career guidance policy as such. This is not a European, but a national competence. But still, this doesn't exclude, of course, cooperation and exchange in the field of career guidance, as happens today in your conference. And we can say that career guidance is crucial for an effective implementation of European actions in the field of skills development, in the field of lifelong learning, in the field of employment. So people need to be aware of the skills, of course, in this new situation, and they need support to find and to enroll in the right learning opportunities that are needed so much for up and reskilling. One of the actions I would also like to point to of the skills agenda is the new Europass Portal that was launched on the 1st of July of this year. So Europass is the European tool to manage your skills, to plan your career and learning. And it's a tool fully adapted to the digital age with an e-portfolio at its heart. And from the e-portfolio, individuals can ask to receive suggestions on learning and job opportunities based on their skills. And in this context, again, guidance practitioners will have an important role in helping people using Europass, especially those people who need most this help. Now, another important point is that Europass will bring together information on guidance or information useful for guidance practitioners. And this concerns, for example, country-specific information on guidance, resources on guidance, information on learning, working, and qualifications in Europe. And in a later stage, also skills intelligence information, very important also for the career guidance profession, will be integrated in Europass. And the guidance section of Europass will be further developed. And also, I would like to welcome any contribution from the conference today on how the Europass can be further developed and improved in relation to career guidance. So very much welcome. Unfortunately, I have to leave after this intervention, but my trainee is there and he is also reporting back to us on the results of the conference. Now, to come back to the skills agenda very quickly, I mean, the skills agenda is really a call for action to work together for skills, to develop skills for jobs, to promote lifelong learning, and for its implementation, good career guidance is crucial. I also would like to congratulate already the award winners that will be announced later today, and I hope you will have a very fruitful and interesting conference, and I look forward to the conference results. Thank you very much.
Děkujeme moc. Mr. Cohen, thank you very much. Já bych poprosil pokračovat ještě v několika úvodních slovech za naše další milé instituce partnerské a jedna je teda ta, která to organizuje, Dům zahraniční spolupráce, tak poprosím Jitku Morčušovou, jestli by řekla pár slov za naší organizaci.
Hezké dobré ráno vám všem. Moc děkuji za přizvání k této konferenci a tímto také omlouvám naší paní ředitelku, která souběžně vystupuje na jiné mezinárodní akci, tak se nemohla zúčastnit. V každém případě velmi děkuji za České zemědělské univerzitě za to, že v letošním roce takto s námi do toho šla. Je pravda, že tato konference navazuje už já myslím, že už je 4. nebo možná 5. v řadě, že takto jsme v minulosti připravovali konferenci s univerzitou Masarykovou, filozofickou v Praze, plzeňskou a toto je další v řadě, tak jsme velmi rádi, že ta tradice se nám rozvíjí a téma kariérového poradenství má prostor i na v univerzitě. Moc jsme rádi i za to, co zmínil pan Nejmec, že tedy kariérové poradenství už zakotvilo se stabilizovala, mohou lidé studovat tento předmět. Už nějakou dobu všichni zmiňujeme, že téma kariérového poradenství je důležité, že se nám pracovní trh vyvíjí a vlastně potřebujeme kariérové poradenství. No a myslím si, že tento rok nám úplně změnil ten pohled na tu situaci. Já dnes, vidíte, jsem v prostoru, který vypadá pomalu jak ve filmu s Georgem Clooneym. Najednou jsme si zvykli na virtuální svět, potřebujeme úplně jiné kompetence a opravdu jsme se posunuli dál. Já jsem ráda, že Dům zahraniční spolupráce svými aktivitami k tomuto může přispívat. A možná jenom úplně krátce bych vám ukázala, co vlastně naše organizace, naše instituce nabízí možná pro české vzdělavatele, pro české organizace a možná i Centrum Euroguidance, úplně krátký vstup, tak já nasdílím pár slajdů. Tak jsme organizace přímo řízená ministerstvem školství a to, na co se zaměřujeme, je opravdu usnadňovat mezinárodní spolupráci ve vzdělávání a podporovat vznik různých mezinárodních partnerství mezi vzdělávacími institucemi a zapojení jednotlivců do těchto aktivit. To, co vnímáme jako velmi důležité, je, že součástí těchto aktivit jsou i poradenské a analytické služby. Velmi významným programem, který vlastně asi je, bych řekla, klíčovým programem, který naše instituce implementuje v rámci České republiky, je program Erasmus+. Dobrou zprávou je, že program Erasmus+, kam vlastně se řadí jako jedna ze sítí i síť Euroguidance, tak bude pokračovat na stávající 7leté období, navazuje období od roku 2021 do roku 2027. V rámci programu Erasmu se tedy mohou uskutečňovat nejenom ty běžné mobility studentů vysokoškolských, jak možná veřejnost nejvíce zná, ale mohou vlastně vznikat poměrně významná mezinárodní dlouhodobá partnerství a nový program přináší i některé nové aktivity a určitě bych všechny z účastníků konference vybídla, aby se podívali, co vlastně program Erasmus Plus v té další fázi nabízí, protože i řada poradenských aktivit lze vlastně realizovat prostřednictvím projektu Erasmus Plus a je možné na něj čerpat finanční prostředky. Síť Euroguidance je součástí Domu zahraniční spolupráce někdy od roku 2007 a my se opravdu snažíme svými aktivitami přispívat k rozvoji poradenských aktivit v České republice a to tedy nejenom, možná za chvilku budeme mluvit o vítězích soutěže Národní ceny kariérového poradenství, tak nejenom touto aktivitou, ale i třeba tím, že umožňujeme realizovat studijní návštěvy mezi poradci, mezi poradenskými pracovištěmi, ale také přinášíme nové informace z oblasti poradenství. Co mám velkou radost, že vlastně v letošním roce v průběhu této konference dojde k ocenění v rámci už 12. ročníku Národní ceny kariérového poradenství nejlepších, vlastně nejkvalitnějších poradenských aktivit, které byly v tomto roce realizovány. To motto letošního ročníku je, myslím, příznačné a charakteristické pro tento rok a možná tedy ještě pro následující rok. Jde to i na dálku a my vidíme, že i ta konference, kterou dnes realizujeme, jde na dálku. Sice to možná občas drhne a za to se omlouvám, ale lze to. A my jsme moc rádi, že tuto aktivitu s námi spolupracuje na ní i Národní poradenské fórum a Centrum Euroguidance ze Slovenska. To je možná na ten úvod za mě všechno. Já bych ráda popřála krásný průběh celé konference a snad tedy bude všechno v tom onlineu fungovat tak, jak má a nebude to drhnout případně. A nebo doufejme, že máme dost kapacit i na České zemědělské univerzitě, aby případně nám pomohla to, co drhne, odstranit. Díky vám moc, mějte se hezky a zatím nashledanou.
Děkujem a předáme slovo dál. Jestli bych mohl poprosit Pavlu Šafránkovou z Úřadu práce.
Dobrý den.
Ano.
Slyšíte mě? Dobrý den. Dobrý den, vážení hosté. Dovolte mi jménem Generálního ředitelství Úřadu práce ČR vás přivítat a poděkovat za účast a zájem o kariérové poradenství. Ráda bych v tomto krátkém čase vám sdělila, že i v této nelehké epidemiologické situaci nabízíme našim klientům poradenské služby v rámci kariérového poradenství, a to výhradně prostřednictvím distančního přístupu. Já si teďka dovolím nasdílet prezentaci. Tak, tady bych jenom poprosila o zpětnou vazbu, jestli prezentaci vidíte. Ano, děkuji vám moc. Děkuji.
Ano,
tak, jaké máme inovace v poradenských službách? Poměrně v nedávné době, vlastně mezi tou první a druhou vlnou koronaviru, tak jsme pomocí krajské pobočky v Pardubicích pilotovali, jakým nástrojem bychom mohli spustit online poradenství směrem k našim klientům. V naší síti můžeme používat aplikaci Skype for Business a tuto aplikaci jsme tedy vyzkoušeli v našich poradenských službách. Jaké máme z toho závěry? Závěry jsou takové, že tato aplikace se nejvíce hodí pro použití v individuálním poradenství, a to jak pro základní, tak i odborné kariérové poradenství. Dále tuto aplikaci můžeme používat i pro skupinové poradenství, ale pouze informativního charakteru, což v našich podmínkách znamená informační skupinová schůzka k povinnostem a právům uchazečů o zaměstnání, dále informační skupinová schůzka k individuálnímu akčnímu plánu a informační skupinová schůzka k rekvalifikacím. Bohužel u poradenských programů zatím online poradenství nedoporučujeme. Jsou tady nedořešené některé otázky, co se týká skupinové dynamiky, která je významná, důležitá v poradenských programech. Dále je nevyřešená otázka i GDPR, ale uvidíme, jak se vše bude vyvíjet a věřím, že i poradenské programy časem zvládneme možná i tou online formou. Dále samozřejmě ve zvýšené míře se pro individuální poradenství využívá telefonických a e-mailových kontaktů pro poradenskou činnost. Zasílají se podklady, výukové podklady pro klienty, ale samozřejmě v těchto nástrojích ty principy a zásady toho poradenství trošku ubývají na významnosti. Ano. Takže je to pouze jakoby doplňující nástroj v poradenství, tyto telefonické a e-mailové kontakty. Jinak naši zaměstnanci, především poradci, specialisté, odborní poradci, poradci na IPSkách, na informačních a poradenských střediscích, se taktéž ve zvýšené míře zapojují do online veletrhu vzdělávání nebo do online veletrhu práce. Tady mohu uvést příklady, například Poslit na svou budoucnost, krajská pobočka v Plzni, nebo burza škol online, nebo European Job Days, krajská pobočka v Pardubicích, nebo Eduka My Job, krajská pobočka v Liberci. Samozřejmě zaměstnanci se zapojí do dalších burz, tady jsem vypíchla jenom ty nejaktuálnější a tady i samozřejmě veliké dík za nasazení našich zaměstnanců. Co se týká dalšího bodu, který bych tady ráda zveřejnila, že jsme v této době mezi tou první a druhou vlnou koronaviru také věnovali zvýšené úsilí mediální činnosti a propagaci poradenských činností. Snažila jsem se vám tady doplnit i odkazy, aby se mohli na to podrobněji podívat. V červnu vyšla tisková zpráva, která je dostupná na portálu úřadpráce.cz. Vznikl nám krásný leták, opravdu výstižný, moderní forma, leták o IPS, to znamená o informačním a poradenském středisku, taktéž dostupný z portálu úřadpráce.cz. Tento leták byl rovněž zveřejněn v novinách E15. Máme natočené zcela nové moderní video, takzvaný videospot o informačním a poradenském středisku, taktéž na tomto portálu. V Reflexu číslo 35/2020 v příloze o vzdělávání nám vyšel článek o úřadu práce a jeho poradenských službách, kde je rozhovor přímo se mnou. No a pak nám dále vznikly i další letáčky a videospoty, například k rekvalifikacím, jak hledat práci, k životopisu. Vše je rovněž dostupné na portálu Úřad práce. Tolikhle v tomto krátkém čase za mě. Já vám v tuto chvíli děkuji za pozornost a přeji vám, ať si ten den z konferencí užijete co nejvíce a ať všichni zvládáme tuto nelehkou epidemiologickou situaci. Děkuji vám a nashledanou.
Děkujeme moc za vstup, který byl z oblasti zaměstnanosti a vrátíme se zase do oblasti vzdělávání a poprosil bych Matěje Bulanta z Národního opereckého institutu, jestli by mohl začít mluvit.
Tak dobré dopoledne, milí účastníci. Já zvolím stejnou formu jako paní Šafránková. To znamená, nasdílím vám prezentaci. Není to tím, že bych se před vámi chtěl schovávat, ale mám tady nějaký problém s kamerou. Takže budu teďka sdílet, doufám, pokud se mi to podaří, tady s vámi prezentaci. No. Tak to bude bez prezentace. Nechce se mi ani prezentace nějakým způsobem načíst, já se omlouvám. Národní pedagogický institut, já jsem velmi rád, že jsme byli přizváni k této akci, že jsme nějakým způsobem mohli se podílet i na tom úvodním slovu. Jak asi všichni z vás tušíte, nebo minimálně vy z vás, kteří se v této problematice kolem vzdělávání pohybujete, tak už vím, proč jsem se nemohl to. Paní Šafránková ještě sdílela video, takže teďka vám nasdílím. Tak, prezentaci. Výborně.
My jsme vám tam pustili prezentaci možná.
Jo, výborně, děkuji.
Tak jestli můžeme zkusit od nás to spustit.
No, mám něco udělat teďka, já zastavuju sdílení.
Tak my to zkusíme ještě jednou.
Zkuste to ještě jednou.
Tak se omlouváme, jsme byli rychlejší, jsme ho chtěli pomoct.
Jste úžasný, jsem moc rád, že jste se mi pokusili pomoct. Moc děkuji za slide, je to výborný, už ho vidím. Tak já tam budu mít dvě věci. Národní pedagogický institut, ta věta, kde jsem skončil, měla přenést tu informaci, že jsme nová nebo relativně nová instituce. Vznikli jsme nově od 1.1.2020 sloučením dvou institucí, Národního institutu pro vzdělávání a Národního institutu dalšího vzdělávání. Jak jistě víte, tak přenášíme si řadu zkušeností, historii kolem kariérového poradenství a kariérového vzdělávání a chceme ty věci nějakým způsobem i dál rozvíjet. Tak, jak prezentovala paní Malá a tak, jak se to téma samotné objevuje ve strategii, tak je to samozřejmě klíčové téma, je velmi důležité a zároveň tam vnímáme řadu věcí, na kterých je potřeba intenzivně zapracovat. Minimálně je intenzivněji diskutovat a je to jedna z věcí, kterou bychom rádi teďka v těch nadcházejících letech otevřeli, umožnili nějakým způsobem, tak jak bylo i řečeno, více reflektovat kariérové poradenství v rámci rámcových vzdělávacích programů, to znamená nějakým způsobem toto téma zakomponovat určitě ve smyslu kariérového vzdělávání. Zároveň jsme si vědomi toho, že pouze tím, že připravíme materiál, jako jsou rámcové vzdělávací programy, tak to neznamená v žádném případě to, že samotné školy s tím tématem budou umět pracovat, že ho ve svých školních vzdělávacích programech budou nějakým způsobem dostatečně podporovat. Takže to je další jakoby strašně klíčová věc a důležitá, na kterou bychom se do budoucna chtěli hodně intenzivně zaměřit, a to je, řekněme, nějaká metodická podpora tématu kariérového vzdělávání, potažmo kariérového poradenství. Už jsme v tom nějaké kroky učinili. V tuhletu chvíli chystáme nějaký jakoby, relativně velký balíček metodických materiálů k tématu kariérového vzdělávání. Zároveň v tuhletu chvíli se myslím, že finišuje profesní kvalifikace kariérový poradce. Chtěli bychom se stát i autorizovanou osobou, která tuhletu profesní kvalifikaci bude poskytovat. A řada dalších věcí, na kterých pracujeme. Jak vidíte, určitě důležitá věc pro samotné kariérové poradenství je náš portál InfoAbsolvent, který obsahuje celou řadu informací při, řekněme, rozhodování v rámci nějaké další profesní dráhy. Jsme národním centrem Europassu, máme pod sebou národní soustavu kvalifikací, což do budoucna bychom chtěli, aby byl jako důležitý nástroj nejenom pro trh práce, ale chtěli bychom tam zintenzivnit využívání i v oblasti, řekněme, školství, školského prostoru. To znamená, proto i nějakým způsobem jsem zmiňoval tu profesní kvalifikaci kariérový poradce. Tak, teď jste mi krásně přeskočili Network Hub, Knowledge Hub. Já myslím, že pro nějaké představení naší instituce a těch plánech, které do budoucna máme, to z mé strany stačí. Já se budu moc těšit na tu konferenci a na informace, které se dozvím. Tak děkuji, omlouvám se za technické potíže, ale myslím, že k tomuto formátu konference trošku patří. Tak děkuji.
Moc děkujeme, my jsme všechno dobře slyšeli, i jsme pak viděli prezentaci, takže v pořádku. Já bych moc poděkoval všem, kdo nás tady dneska přivítali, protože jsou to naši vlastně významní stakeholdři v oblasti kariérového poradenství a jsme rádi, že jsme tady všichni dneska společně na konferenci. A teď bychom předtím, než přejdeme na panelovou debatu, kde se těšíme na naše hosty, panelisty ze zahraničí, tak než začneme, i když máme malé zpoždění, tak bychom zkusili malou interakci s vámi, jenom takový testík, kdo tu dneska s námi jste a jestli nespíte.
No, ale já teďka, tak já se omlouvám, já ještě stopnu a já vám dám jak se tomu říká, do chatu, ježiš, tak to je úplně špatného. Ne, pardon. Tak jsme chtěli být interaktivní a úplně nám to teď nejde tak, jak bychom chtěli, tak se omlouváme. Takže chtěla jsem vám zjednodušit práci, abyste nemuseli hledat, připojovat se na Mentimeter jenom rychlým odkazem, ale nevadí, tak vy to uvidíte, když vám to nasdílíme. Takže já půjdu zpátky a nasdílím teda tímhle stylem. Tak, to znamená, tak, jestli vidíte, nahoře máte, jestli půjdete na www.menti.com a využijete kód 74 88 13 0 a zkusíte nám napsat, z jaké země jste. Skvěle, děkujeme. Pojďte na to. Tak se nám to plní, pojďte, vyzkoušejte. Ano, uvidíme, odkud máme nejvíce účastníků. Takže krásně, děkujeme za to. Můžeme si udělat obrázek, že opravdu máme z různých koutů Evropské unie i mimo, ze Švýcarska. Zkusíme ještě druhý. Tak, moc poděkujeme. A máme ještě jednu otázku. Tohle máme zastoupení země. A já vás ještě poprosím, jestli mi to půjde, zpátky. Tak, takže děkujeme. A ještě budeme mít jednu otázku. A ta bude podobná. Tak, ještě vydržte minutku a už vám zase nasdílím. A to se bude týkat toho, teď jsme viděli, odkud jste, z jaké země a teď z jakého jste města. Abychom věděli, odkud všude jste připojeni a odkud nás sledujete. A kam všude bude mít tedy konference dopad. Takže vidíme Bratislava, Plzeň, Riga, Sofia.
Tak moc děkujeme za to, že nám to funguje. Děkuji, že to zvládla technicky a ještě se k tomu tedy vrátíme, protože si myslíme, že to je pěkný nástroj. Ale teď bychom poprosili už panelisty, aby se připravili, takže já je představím, pustíme se do panelové diskuze s malým zpožděním, která nám začíná o 17 minut později. Zkusíme ji udržet v tom čase a přidat na konci zase 10 minut a nějak to doženeme. A poprosím, ať se tedy tady přivítám s námi TRISTRAMa HOOLEYho jako moderátora. Měl by tu být s námi DIENER, JAANA KETTUNEN, JEROME ROSSIER, JIRI VOTAVA. A tito panelisté by se měli zamyslet nad tématem, jestli musíme najít nějaké nyní nové pojetí kariérového poradenství ve světě, který se mění. A já je tady všechny vítám a poprosím TRISTRAMa, jestli by TRISTRAM, if you can start with your...
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully people can hear me. I'm going to share some slides and we'll get going on the panel. If I understood rightly, we've now got until 11:25. And so we're going to try and get some discussion going. Obviously, we're dealing with what is probably on all of our minds at the moment, which is the pandemic. This activity that we're all involved in, career guidance, we've been talking about it for decades, for centuries even. But over the last 6 months, we've got really new context for that. And we're trying to think through what does that really mean for our activity. So thank you for inviting us here to have this conversation. These conferences in the Czech Republic have been really important. I've been to a couple of them over the last few years. I'm really sad not to be able to be in Prague this time, but as we'll be talking about, this is really some of the issue, I think. So we've got some really excellent experts to tell you about what they think in a second. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you've got questions or comments that you want to make, if you add them to the chat, I'll try and feed them into the discussion. I'll just start with a few thoughts, really, before we start to hopefully get us going. So first, I think let's say, well, with career, this term career that we're using, that's our central concept. It's the way I understand it, it's the individual's journey through life, learning and work. It's not just about paid work, it's about how we connect all of our life together. And of course, our life has been radically changed over the last few years. And I've just put up the latest data on the pandemic, and sadly, it seems just every time I look at this chart, it seems to just keep going up and up. The number of daily cases that we have are just getting bigger and bigger every time we look. So now hopefully we've got the vaccine and so on coming. You know, this hopefully will not go on forever, but at the moment it's very much a live crisis. So for me, this has been a huge change. So rather than being in Prague today, you can see that top picture there of the wall opposite my window with the drain pipe running down. That's what I'm looking at. And, you know, my life is really very, very changed. I'm still working. I'm lucky. Many people are not still working. I'm still working, but lots of my social life, my professional life, and so on has changed. So how do we respond to this in career guidance? For me, there are two big issues that we need to think about. There's the kind of labour market impacts of the crisis, and there's what I've described as the psychosocial impacts of the crisis. And I'm sure other people will be picking these issues up. So if we think about the labour market, this is some data from the International Labour Organization, and they point out what this chart shows is the proportion of the world's populations of the world that are affected by some level of closure of the labour market. So some special arrangements, lockdown. In Britain at the moment, we're in pretty much a complete lockdown. Not all countries are like that, but almost everyone has got some kind of change to the way in which the labour market's working. So the global labour market is radically different now to how it was in January. And that's, I think, offers a really big context for shifting thinking about career guidance. And this is Geeta Gopinath, who's from the International Monetary Fund, and she says this is not going to be short term. It's going to take time to heal. Investments held back by uncertainty, balance sheets problems, and lost schooling impairs human capital. We're now facing what I would call the long ascent, a difficult climb that will be long, uneven, and uncertain. So these economic and labour market effects are not going to go away overnight. And of course, I've already talked about my life, but I'm not alone. So if we start to think about these psychosocial, how are we feeling about it? How is this changing the way we're thinking? Our lives, our experiential nature of our day-to-day lives has really been changed. We're online a lot more. We're not able to use lots of the services that we might historically have been used to using. You know, we can't go to concerts, we can't go to theatre. We spend all of our time on screens. And this has led to a really sort of complex shift in our social connections, I think. It's this sort of strange contradiction where on one hand, we need each other more than ever. We're more aware of the connections. We're aware that actually our safety, our physical and health safety is dependent on how other people act. And so we're bound to other people, and yet at the same time we're isolated from them. And that's then raising issues on mental health, all sorts of challenges. And for me at least, and I think for lots of people, we've seen this, a recognition of our fragility. We perhaps didn't think about illness as being something that was going to come into our life, and it was seen as the exception. And now every time we go out, every time we interact with people, we have this thought that maybe we'll get ill, and maybe we'll be okay, and maybe we won't. And so this all changes us. And so in an article that I wrote with Ronald Sultana and Bria Thompson, who I know have both been to speak to this conference in the past, at the beginning of the lockdown, we said, this is a pedagogic moment. It's a moment for thinking. It's a moment for thinking about what's important. And it's a moment then for career guidance professionals to think about how they help people. So how should career guidance respond to all of these challenges that we're experiencing? And we define career guidance in the book that I wrote with Ronald and Brea. We say it's about supporting individuals and groups to discover more about work, leisure and learning, to think about their place in the world. We say it can take all sorts of different forms, but it's about helping through purposeful learning opportunities to support individuals to consider and reconsider work, leisure and learning in the light of new information and experiences, and to take both individual and collective action as a result of this. And so this is something that we've tried to introduce to our definition of career guidance. I think it's very relevant at the moment because some of the problems that people are facing at the moment are not individual problems, they're collective problems. So this, I think, throws a challenge to us. What is the possibilities for career guidance in the current circumstances? What is, as we approach something that is the new normal, what is this new normal going to look like? What is the new normal career going to look like? How is it going to be changed? So I think I've suggested a few starting points, and others will pick these up, I'm sure. I think, three things that occur to me. One is that digital guidance has to be a core competency. JAANA will be talking about that later. It can't be a specialism or an option. We all have to be able to do it. Second thing is that the basic promise of career can offer people or help people to find a better life might just not be true at the moment. And how do we respond to that? And the third thought is that your prospects for a better life, even for life itself, are really bound up with other people. So there's just some initial thoughts. I'd be interested to hear what people say in the chat if you've got ideas about how career guidance has to change. But I'm now going to hand over to our panel. So I'm going to ask Thomas to come first and to talk about this career guidance. How are we going to deal with it in an upside down world? So Thomas, can you hear me? Have we got Thomas here? We're missing Thomas. Okay, well perhaps let's move on and we'll do JAANA, and hopefully I'll have a bit of a look, because I was having a bit of a dialogue with Thomas in email, so hopefully he will find his way into the session in a second. But JAANA, would you like to start off by giving us your thoughts on where we are and how ICT might help us?
Yes, thank you, Tristram. And first of all, thank you for the organizers for inviting also me to this interesting conference and to this panel. And as Tristram said, I will give a few thoughts about the role of ICT in career guidance. As was already mentioned, the whole career guidance sector had to take quite a jump in a very short time when we moved with our practice to the digital spaces. For some, this happened in overnight. For some had previous practice, but there were a lot of us who also had to jump on totally new grounds. While we see that in global perspective, there has been a clear increasing use of information and communication technologies in most countries, there is still a big variation how successful we have been on this adaptation and how our operations varies between country to country, or within country, in region, or even in some local variation. So there is a clear need for improving the general implementation of information and communication technologies in career services. And this is what we all for sure have recognized, that this is an increasingly important issue in our sector. And as Tristram mentioned, this as for all, this really is a pedagogical moment where we can check what has worked, where the challenges have been, what are the good practices that we as a whole sector could learn and improve and share among others. Well, if we look generally, the role of ICT it's not new. It has been, the practices have been evolving, but there is based on research and what we know, there's 5 general approaches how individuals and how professionals use technology. There's always a certain group who has a certain passive approach in using technology. And on this current situation, although for those, this is also a group that we need to focus and try to support, that they can get the services, they can get the information we help them to improve their skills and get into this digital world. There's an information approach. If we look from the individual side, it means they are searching information. When they look on support, they look information relating education, occupation. There is a communication approach where citizens are looking for who I can talk with, who could support me on these questions, through which medias. Is it a telephone, email, is the website? And then there is the collaborative career exploration approach. Is there a group, is there a place where people in similar situations have been brought together where I could access or where I can improve or discuss my thoughts? And the co-careering approach, this is much relating what Tristram was saying, that the social need. I mean, people are coming together in different technological bases just to discuss, reflect career education related questions, and they organize among themselves. If we look at from professional side, the information, this requires that we as a professional sector have a good understanding of different technologies and how can we use them when we deliver information. What are the different modes of delivering information? Text-based, videos, one-to-one, one-to-many. As a professionals, we need to have a good proficiency in seeking and choosing and evaluating the different kind of online content and services. And information and media literature skills are coming increasingly important. On the other hand, this means that in career education, we need to support and put emphasis on that individuals will also get these skills. In a communication approach, we as a professionals, we need to develop a good skills on using technologies in visual technologies, but also text-based communication technologies in our professional practice. And many technologies still rely on writing. So how do we move our professional practice? The showing the presence in written formats requires a new thinking. Also, how do we motivate and assist individuals to processing a different kind of information and data when they are on their own or when we try to support them on their educational and career related questions is skills when we are in distance. In group settings, this is where we, our skills move to the different methods and techniques and activities. How do we support the collaborative process, career learning, develop the group sharing, group creating and building up the group's career management skills. These are also employability skills that they need in employment and future work life. There's a lot of opportunities for novel practices to increase the engagement with both career professionals and career informations, and number of tools which we are currently trying and testing and learning and sharing. The last one, co-careering. This relates a lot to the activities that take place in open settings. Individuals for example, in social media, come together, ask from peers, colleagues, friends of friends, and share their questions and seek for support and share their knowledge. This, from our professional perspective, is a new area to think, how do we make ourselves available in open social media spaces where individuals are discussing issues that come to our professional sector. This requires a mindful, properly managed and monitored online presence, and requires a new thinking for not only as a professional, but as a whole sector. How do we make ourselves available there? What we know for sure is that change with the technology will continue. So this is not a story that stops, but as I said it, we should now look into the practices, what we are gaining, how do we share this, and put more emphasis also that the digital guidance really, it's not something that happens separately in our professional practice, but it is, and it has to become a core competency, as Tristram already mentioned. So we have a good opportunity to create new practices, to better reach individuals and support them in their career exploration and decision making. But for the challenge for us as a whole process, a profession, is to decide how do we best use these technologies that exist and will be emerging. And competency to work in this area is increasingly an important area. I thank you. And if you have any comments or questions, Tristan will moderate the chat.
That's great. Thank you so much. We'll hopefully have time for questions and discussion between panelists as well at the end of this. So I'm going to pass straight over to Thomas and ask him to now present on this upside down world that we're living in and how we should be responding to it. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, all of you.
You're on mute, I think, at the moment, Thomas.
No. Do you hear me? I'm not.
Yes, okay.
Okay, I'm not on mute. Maybe I have to.
Thomas, it's okay. We hear you.
Okay. Okay. Oops. I'm a little bit handicapped because I had an elbow operation, and so some things took a little bit more time. So thank you for the invitation, and I try to keep myself in, so I make it brief. So I would like to open the discussion to a little bit to the future. I think the first step we are in with the pandemic is really this going online and using all these tools, which are important. We also developed an online tool, an interactive platform for career counseling. So that's something, I think a lot of invention are going on in this field. And but to give something like a bigger picture, and I think also my impulse will maybe be a little bit controversial. I would like to stress the point that in the moment I think that projects against unemployment, and unemployment is increasing during the crisis, but not only, so we also face other huge changes through technology and things and so on. So the development of projects against unemployment could in future increasingly include aspects of regional development and ecology. That's my stance for the moment. And I would like to share you a few ideas about this. Moment, so share the Bildschirm. Yes. Okay. So, oops, that was one too much. Some people react to social changes like sensitive seismographs. This is something I experienced at the end of the 80s. In this time, ecology was on the top of the list of social relevant issues. And at this time, I managed the alternative business directory. It was a business directory for the ecology sector. And those dozens of people called me after the publication of the book because they were looking for jobs in the ecological sector. Even though they hadn't advertised jobs. And in this time in Switzerland, there was full employment. And all the companies were desperately looking for staff. So I asked people, why you call me, why you are calling me? And they told me, I would like to do something meaningful. So when I come home at the end of my workday, I would have the feeling I did something meaningful. So that was first time that I realized that meaning is a huge topic in career guidance. Yes, and now 30 years later, I think we face much bigger challenges than 30 years before. So on the surface, it's the pandemic in the moment that keeps us on the edge of our seats. But in the background, other major issues are waiting, like climate crisis, digitalization, and things like this. So navigating in the time of crisis. So when I look to my clients, then I observe the following. While some of the clients have become very cautious in the face of the critical developments in the job market, others others become more courageous and dealing more purposeful with previously neglected life dreams and impulses of change. There is, for example, the woman who is energetically pushing forward her idea of a community-supported agriculture. Another is starting a training as a color designer, which is completely unrelated to her profession, and so on. And of course, we can call this, I have in the moment mostly paid clients, so I work with a more privileged part of the society. And of course, we can say this is kind of romantic escapism. Yeah, but I'm not sure, because I also work with other people from other social backgrounds, and I think the question of doing something meaningful is not restricted to the privileged, to the upper class somehow. And so I also think that we as professionals are maybe dealing differently with these issues, because I'm working since 30 years also in this field of ecology and alternative projects. I'm quite open to this kind of dreams and ideas. Not everything is possible to realize for them, but some of these ideas and aspects are, in my opinion, also a kind of signal from the future, to call it like this. So, emerging future. Because when I look on a theory of this kind of projects, then I have this impression that they are going somehow in a similar direction. They deal with community, with food security, with ecology, with regional production, and more generally, with greater stability and resilience. And I think this aspect of regional production and resilience is also stressed in the pandemic. And it's somehow supported now from a larger part of society, and still hesitatingly, even from some politicians. So I would like to give you just a few insights to projects in my small region. I come from Switzerland, but since 12 years I live in Austria, close to Vienna, in a small city, 10,000 inhabitants. And in this small part of the world, I see a lot of projects going in this direction. So there is, for example, a local electromobile taxi service organized as a union. I think union is, in German we say Verein. I think Spolek would be the right translation to Czech. So it's not a commercial project. And there is a gardening project for long-term unemployed people in this small city. There is a shop with products exclusively from regional producers. There is an initiative to share solar power electricity locally. And there is a community-supported agriculture close to the place I live. So, moment, going back. So I think this triangle of meaning that global and local needs and individual skills, when they come together with motivation, then we produce something like meaning. And this is, I think, also one aspect of career counseling or guidance. I would bring it to one short sentence. There is more than enough good work. Work that satisfies, work that makes sense, work that builds up, work that also keeps us healthy. The problem, especially in structural weak regions, is a different one. There is no one who looks closely at what the unemployed actually want to do, what they can do, where their qualities lies. What is the point of it, as long as there is nobody afterwards who can create adequate jobs for them? So, the point I would like to stress, this triangle, regional development, also development of jobs, projects against unemployment and ecology. Yep. And as a last point, remember, not all work is a job, and not all jobs are work. Not all jobs are meaningful, not all work is meaningful, and not all meaning is from job and work. And just to see people in this totality, even they are starving for the next job in the moment, I think that can be helpful. Good. So I really try to make it short. We are a little bit over time, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful, I think, because I think we've already started. We've been talking about the how do we give guidance in this new world, but we're now also talking about the why. What's the purpose of it? What are we trying to achieve, and so on. I'm going to hand over to Jerome now, but I'm sure we'll come back to these issues. There's some really good questions going in the chat. We've all been dealing with a few technical problems. Sorry if you heard one of my kids run in the middle of it. I've now muted my microphone, but yeah, I think we're getting there. So yeah, Jerome, would you like to pick this up and give us some further thoughts?
Okay. Okay, so I hope that you see my slides. Okay, fine. So I would like to thank the conference organizers and Peter. And in fact, it would have been a pleasure for me to be in Prague in person, but I'm also happy to be online. So thank you very much for this invitation. And I have to say that I have a special relationship with Prague, because in the 90s, I spent some time at the Academy of Sciences of the Czech Republic. So I'm very happy to be with you and to try to convince you that it's very important to provide lifelong career guidance, and especially in time of crisis. So since the beginning of our field and the contribution of persons, career guidance has been developed to help the most vulnerable people to enter the labor market. And so career counseling was seen as a way to promote social inclusion. And in the preface of Claparède, who was a teacher at the University of Geneva, in the report has written for the International Labour Organization, we can already read that the economic and social importance of vocational guidance is now generally recognized, and that vocational guidance will raise the status of working classes by reducing unemployment securing reasonable wage for the workers. So we can see that since the beginning, vocational guidance was really seen as a way to promote social justice and to try to help people to integrate the labor market, but more generally the society. After 120 years, the questions of social justice is still very important. And for example, the statutes of the International Association for Education and Vocational Guidance states that the mission of this association is to contribute to addressing diversity and social justice issues in education and work. So, and this question is still very important, and we see many books published on this question. Career guidance is also conceived as a way to promote access to work, but also to good work or decent work, and the importance of providing good works or meaningful work, as we have seen just before, was already mentioned by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, where you can write, everyone has a right to just and favorable conditions of work. But after the question, of course, is to how to define these good conditions of work. And in 2015, this question of decent work and its four pillars in terms to access to work, which is a very important question in many parts of the world. Social protection, right at work, and social dialogue has become central elements of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development of the United Nations. And as maybe never, our society has to face many challenges that may have long-term impacts on how we live and how we live together. And so, for example, we are facing a very important demographic growth. And in most Western countries, we also have an aging population, whereas in some other countries, we have a very young population. And so you can see here the expectation about the increase of the aging population, and this will of course be a challenge for all our social security system in the future. And we also have to manage an important migration flow due to this unbalanced demographic growth in the different parts of the world. And this has also, of course, several implications for career counselors who have to work with many different people. We also see rapid technological evolution, robotization, digitalization, and this has an impact on the knowledge of people who become more quicker obsolescence. So people have to retrain and have maybe to find a new job and so on. We're also facing major climatic crisis, and so you can see here a protest in Switzerland. But we have seen this all over the world. This is of course a very major challenge for our societies. We also have to face a globalization of markets, knowledge, and exchanges, and all these changes and evolutions are associated with different social consequences. So, for example, we observe the precarization of the labor market. So some people have very unstable jobs. We observe a tertiarization of the labor market. So half of the job are in the tertiary sector around the world. We observe a dualization of the labor market. Some people have very unstable jobs. Some others have a very good and better situations. We also observe that career paths are less linear. So some people have still a quite linear trajectory, but we have many people who have to change many times their job, have to retrain, find a new sector of activity, and so on. And so we are speaking about the pluralization of career paths. And we also observe a quite important inequalities in the distribution of wealth. And this not only within countries, but also across countries. And these inequalities tend to increase. So increase of social uncertainty is also associated with social spaces that are less structured. So the social norms are less clear, And so it gives more freedom to the people, but it's at the same time, it gives more insecurity. So in this changing world, it become much more complex. The job of career counselor also become much more complex because the information is more complex. The trajectories are more diverse and population are diverse and so on. So it's become more challenging also for professionals of our field. So now to come to this COVID-19 crisis and the implications for career guidance. I think that one theory that could be useful in this case is this cumulative disadvantage theory. And the COVID-19 crisis can be seen as an additional crisis to the challenges that we already have. And with no doubts, we'll have to face other types of crises in the future. And so we have to learn from this crisis. And the cumulative disadvantage theory states that inequalities in terms of capital, that can be financial, social, psychological, or in terms of health, tend to increase across time. So disadvantages tend to accumulate and they increase exposure to risk. So the COVID-19 crisis put our societies under pressure and amplifies all the adverse social consequences mentioned above. So precarization, dualization, non-linear careers, unemployment, social inequalities, etc. All these aspects are just amplified. For example, in India, social disparities that are already quite high have increased during this pandemic. So the higher upper class seems to get richer and increase their spending, especially by buying more luxury goods, for example. And at the same time, you have tens of thousands of workers from the middle or lower class with no work for the moment because of the pandemic, and their families who are leaving New Delhi to return to their villages at the start of the pandemic. Even in a country as Switzerland, where the state has taken several social and economical measures that are Swiss COVID-19 bridging credit for companies, for example, or special financial support for self-employed, or providing partial unemployment measures for people. So people get 80% of their salary. This is nice for people who have high salaries, but for people who have low salaries, it can be even quite problematic. So the unemployment rate did also increase in Switzerland, and the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs assumes that manufacturing output will fall by around 25% of the total economic added value compared to 2019. Okay. So the implications of this crisis for our field is that we need to adopt a multi-level approach. So when a society is put under pressure, as by the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to take macro, meso, and micro level actions. So we need to take macro level action to have public policies, responses to COVID-19 crisis that can be social or economical policies, but we also need lifelong learning and lifelong guidance policies. We also need to take meso level action at the level of companies, organizations, families, and finally we need to have micro level actions at the level of intervention for people, like career guidance, retraining, access to healthcare, and so on. And all this action to try to remain in a secure work, and this secure work should lead to systemic careers. So the idea is to try to keep people at work or to help them to find new work at the end of the crisis or even during the crisis. But for this, you need to have all these measures at the different level. And the ILO suggests to implement the following 4 pillars. So the first pillar is stimulating the economy and employment by, for example, active fiscal policies. The pillar 2 is to support enterprises, jobs, and income by extending social protection, for example. The third pillar is to protect workers in the workplace by adapting the work situation, the workplace, make teleworking, for example. And finally, to try to to rely on social dialogue in order to increase the resilience of people, of workers, companies, and of communities. In addition to these pillars, it is very important to take care of the most vulnerable people as informal economy workers in some countries, for example, in Africa or in South America. To take care about younger workers who have difficulties to enter the labor market, like students who finish their studies, older workers, 50 and more, who have very hard time to find a new jobs, migrant workers, and so on. Another implication of this type of crisis, according to myself, is that we need to promote lifelong guidance. So when social and economical conditions change drastically, people may face major work transition and have to retrain. Public policies have to create conditions in which retraining is possible, and this for all, not only for young people, but also for older people. And public policies have to create conditions, we argue that in addition to lifelong learning, which is very important, but allows you to stay in your sector, we also need to provide lifelong career counseling, and people have to move from one sector to the other. So my argument is that in an unstable world, when you have a lot of insecurity and where people have to retrain, we need to combine lifelong learning and lifelong counseling. Another implication that was already mentioned before is that we need to diversify our types of interventions. So if we want to provide career counseling for all, we need to adapt our interventions to the possible clients we have. In particular, the underserved and the most vulnerable people in these times of COVID-19 have to be reached, and it's sometimes a quite challenging task. So we need to diversify our types of interventions. So I was thinking about trying to have more preventive interventions for people who may lose their jobs, for example, for people who are not in employment, for example, and this type of groups. We also need to have more group interventions, and this for, obvious cost reasons. And of course, we need to develop digitalized distance interventions for face-to-face interventions, but also by means of a specialized internet platform. And we have developed some, or we are currently about to develop such a platform in Switzerland for people of 40 and more. We also need to develop more contextualized interventions for the most vulnerable people of our societies, as migrants, needs, and other types of populations. Finally, I wanted to mention, and I guess that Gert van Brussel will say more about it later, that the International Association for Educational and Vocational Guidance is just about to release an official communiqué about this very important topic. And this communiqué is entitled Lifelong Educational and Vocational Guidance for All and Support for Sustainable Work in a Turbulent Environment. So I think it's very important to take into account this crisis so that we learn as much as possible to be prepared for the future crisis we will have to face in our societies. So I just would like to thank the people of my team and to thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I think it's really helpful that it reminds us to place the current crisis into a wider context. That there are, I think all the presentations have done that to some extent, but I think we're trying to remember that, yes, there are some particular things that are related to COVID, but they also relate to wider issues that you've discussed, the precarity, the ecological challenges, the shifting nature of the world due to digitalization. All of these bigger shifts, I think, are very important. I did just want to pick up something that someone's been asking in the chat. If you could say a little bit more about this concept of dualization of work, because I think people were quite interested in that. So perhaps if you could just give us a little bit more information about that, that'd be really helpful.
So, we speak about dualization of work when the labor market split into two categories workers. So you have some workers who are doing quite fine, have a secure job with social security and so on. And you have another part of the part of the labor market who is made of workers in very unstable jobs, like part-time jobs and so on. And so in some countries, we observe an increase of these two categories of workers. So some of them having a good job, a meaningful job, and the other one being like Uber drivers or things like that, you know? And this is, of course, very, very dangerous for societies, because this means that a great number of people are working in quite bad conditions.
Great. Thank you for that. I'll come back to more questions for all of the panel at the end, but let's just finish up with our last speaker, which is JIRI, who I believe is actually in the university in Prague. Is that right?
Welcome from Prague. I hope that you listen to me and hear me. So I will also share some ideas with both panelists and also other people. I think my presentation will be a little bit different, because I will try to speak more about some philosophical issues connected with that topic about future of career guidance and counseling. And also I would like to share some experience we already have with our environment at university, because it's maybe similar to all institutions at the moment, that we somehow need to rearrange the way we both teach and support students. Here at the university, we have also guidance and counseling center for students in the sense of their career guidance and also other types of support. So in these times, we have really to think about the way we work with our clients, with our students. So my presentation will take just a few minutes, but I would like to open some more ethical and philosophical questions about guidance and counseling. I also made some notes listening to previous presentations, and I was really satisfied and I would say with many ideas that somehow fit to what I would like to say, especially the question about technologies, because both in Finland, Switzerland and other countries nowadays, we think that it's kind of a time of change. And we hope that now, finally, we can use a lot of opportunities which are connected with new technologies, and we somehow wait for that new options. On the other hand, I think that it's not so easy to believe only that technologies will solve everything. So in my presentation, I would like a little bit stress some ethical issues, and maybe this would be also, I hope, important opening for a panel discussion later. So in my presentation, first of all, I tried to somehow research to make kind of research about current issues in the situation, and for me at the moment I would like to focus especially on communication. And in this topic, it's a very important question for me: what to do in case we somehow lose direct contact with person we are supposed to work with, or we are supposed to talk to, or we are supposed to guide or counsel. So for me, the faceless communication is kind of threat personally. I know it from my lessons, for example. Here you can see this could look like this. Sometimes we teach and our classroom somehow disappears. This is my print screen. Of course, it doesn't function always like this. I try to cooperate more with students, but sometimes I feel that my students disappear somewhere. I don't see them. I don't know them. I have one new course and I have never met that people personally. So what to do? What is the new condition of learning, and how does it influence the relation between teacher or counselor and the student or client? So for this presentation, I decided to use two quotes from thinkers or researchers who somehow tried to explain more about that faceless communication, or maybe who would like to contribute to current situation. One article that I quote here is about the fact of social distancing, and that authors mentioned that it's very important to take in account the new situation, and they worry somehow that the social distancing will really influence people in many ways. It will cause stress and many difficulties, not only technically, but also in the way of their personality. And I again, according to my note, my notes, I think that this also was also already mentioned previously in presentations of other panelists. So for me, it's clear that we will try to solve a problem connected with a pandemic situation, both in technical way, but I also would like to stress that we have to really be careful about the human issues in that problem, and that we need to really carefully think about conditions of interaction, human interactions, and what new it will bring to guidance and counseling. So for me, face is not only the surface, and I think it's important that we can transmit picture, we can transmit a voice, we can share our contents through internet, but on the other hand, it's very important not to forget that face is something which goes deeper and which opens the life of a person, and it's very important to prevent some kind of dehumanization or depersonalization of clients we work with. So in this place, I would like to use a second quote of my favorite philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas, who in many works stressed somehow that the face is something very crucial. The border of face of the other is something which gives me the key to eternity, but also it will allow me to respect the other person like person. So it's not possible to completely control the other person. So in this quote, I will try to not read it, but just I would like to stress that in this quote, he speaks about a kind of warm quality of contact, of human contact, which gives us kind of touching, which opens something more than only exchange of information. And it is in this place I was really glad to listen to JAANA and her presentation, because he spoke about kind of not only informational approach to guidance, but she spoke also about kind of cooperation or co-carrying in guidance. And I liked it a lot, because this is very, very close to my world view, and I believe that this could be also very important for discussions, how guidance and counseling will change and how to redefine this field. So in the end, of course, I wanted to open some practical space or a question about what to improve or what could be done. And I think that for me, I don't know, maybe you are much more experienced practitioners, but for me, it's kind of a trial error way, because both in guidance and counseling, because many students write emails and they ask questions about their problems and needs. But also during my teaching, we are trying to establish some environments that are more personal. So still I need to find some recommendations And for me, it's very, very difficult because I think that it's not only the technical part of our work, but it must be also kind of human or skills we need to apply for that new situation. So I tried to list here some recommendations, especially in smaller group. I try to apply it. So for me, it's very important, for example, to break anonymity during our online sessions, to bring some emotions or activity or actions, and to allow people to build some kind of inner space which is not anonymous, but which could be like, for example, using some portfolio, which could be very personalized and very close to that human approach. So I know that comparing to other panelists, my presentation was more general, but I hope that this could also open some more discussion, and I believe that it's very important not to forget that career guidance must be always part of human interaction and human relationships. So thank you for thank you for attention.
Thank you so much. Before, just as a question to you, somebody raised in the chat, I think we will be interested. What's the significance of you've used a lot of Native American imagery in that presentation. Where does that come from?
Okay. It's a good question. I'm I am fan of history, Northern American history, and for me it's kind of because it's very impressive to look at the face of very or Northern American native people, and for me I wanted to compare that image with kind of it's difficult to say, but for in general, for me, it's kind of important to study faces in general. So it could be one answer, and maybe I forget to show one more picture in the end. So I will try to share a presentation just shortly again to be sure, because I forget to use the one slide which is in the end. So I wanted to add it just for the end of my presentation. It will be just very short. So in fact, I forget to show this last picture, and maybe this is the key to key answer to your question, because for me all that pictures, all that faces very strict, very calm, and I think that emotions or some warmth is part of communication, and this is very difficult to transfer, and this is one idea I wanted to share. So that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. That's excellent. So we've got a lot to think about, but we've got a nice little bit of time now to discuss some of these issues. So I'm going to just try and maybe pick up 2 or 3 points which we can then discuss as a panel. And so I'd like to start with the digital thing, because it's come up, I think, repeatedly in everybody's presentations. I know, as somebody, you know, along with JAANA, I'm someone who's often asked to talk about digital guidance, and I think I certainly have been quite frustrated over the years that digital guidance, which seemed to me to have lots of potential, was not being taken up and used as much as I would have liked. But then the last 6 months, we've seen a really radical shift as everybody's gone online. And I suppose it's been a huge natural experiment. And I really would like to ask the panel to reflect on this. And some of the things that I think have come up in the chat is, what have we learned about what works best in this period? What's been the most, what are the most effective forms of digital guidance? Are there questions about certain people being left out, or new inequalities moving in? A number of people have asked about that. If we move things online, what about people who are not comfortable with working online? Are there different ways in which people from different backgrounds or with different levels of power relate to these online tools, for example, being willing to show their pictures and so on. So that question about, you know, how does it change who can access guidance, but also I think very important from the last presentation, what is lost? If we move things online, what is lost with this? So I'd be interested, I think let's go to JAANA as you're the kind of leading expert on this, but I'd really be interested to hear from everyone else as well. How are you feeling about this huge digital experiment that we've been trying over the last 6 months? So JAANA, to you.
Thank you. Tristram, you raised a lot of interesting points, but what are our feelings on this? Of course, I share what Tristram started. In a way, I find this very exciting, since as a sector, I think many have also been quite surprised about the current situation of the technology. I mean, technology like where we are now, what are the possibilities? The visual elements have been coming, we see we can have a one. So in a way, I find this time that it's exciting to see that professionals are taking the technology and trying and testing it out. Of course, I hope that this continue. We recognize where it works well. We learn what are the key challenges and which doesn't work, so that we carry this learning on and take it as a pedagogical moment to improve and look where the different ways of using technology work best with different target groups. So by expanding our understanding about what kind of approaches is possible, we can make informed-based decisions. How do we use technology also on those times when we move to a new normal? But of course, the reality is that we still there are these challenges. There is challenges that some people don't have access to technology. It might be that there is not internet available. It might be that due to economical reason, they don't have such a wide opportunities to use phones or something. We have challenges relating the access to information. Some of the information resources, although they were good, they might be behind a payment, so that you need to, or in certain countries, there is not such a reliable nationwide information sources available. And then we come to the skills. I mean, although a lot of people have a basic digital skills, it's a different kind of skill setting to work and collaborate and learn. So this is not thought. We have to also support that we as a professional give up the skills, but help youngsters and students to communicate, collaborate, share their feelings in online. So, and in nationwide, the integration even on national systems is many cases just left. And there's a lot of possibilities to improvement. I would like to come this facelessness in a way that there are also, as it was mentioned in the chat, there is also some people who might feel it easier if I don't have to look the professional in the face who will screen me all the time, how are you, or trying to read my emotions. But it's easier for them to write, think, and focus on the question and have an opportunity to only communicate in text space. So just wanted to bring this in issue that it's often that we might feel comfortable that, okay, it's important for me to see how is Tristram feeling, and I try to read his emotions, and my interpretation might be totally wrong what he's actually thinking. So this is a thing what I'd like to also remind us that it's good to keep on mind. Well, a long response, but some impressions.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else on the panel want to come in on this issue of what have we learned about digital guidance, digital counselling that we should take forward? And what should we not, I suppose, as well? any other panelists would like to comment on that?
Thomas has his hand up.
I would like to share a brief idea about this. So I think to communicate online is also something like a cultural technique. And so in the beginning, it was so much overlight from the technology and things are working or not working. And behind, I think it's the most important thing is to get in a rapport with your interlocutor. And I think this is something we can learn. So when you read a book, you see all the pictures, you are emotional, totally involved, and it's just paper. And now we communicate online, and it's just the screen. But beyond this screen or behind this screen, there are all these emotions, and I think it's something we can learn to get a rapport with the client and to communicate on a deeper level, even through screens. But it's not, it's something we have to train. And sometimes I think for me it's easier with some people just to use the phone, only to hear the voice, because for some people the technical stuff is too complicated, and to have them on phone, it's easy, they know that. And hearing the voice can offer also a variety of emotions and feelings, because voice is very vivid somehow. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Is it Yuri, are you wanting to get in or not?
Okay, I don't have any special comment, but I'm really glad that JAANA mentioned also that positive aspects of faceless communication. So I didn't want to be such pessimistic, but again, for me, this is the question about the target group, about the person who is behind the net or the computer on the other side, and we should ask he or her, him or her about feelings and about how is the person satisfied with the way of the communication is conducted. So for me, this is a very nice topic, interesting topic, and maybe again I would like to mention that during that 6 months we really tried to rearrange many environments to improve the quality of communication, and I think it is good impulse, good challenge, and we will see what will happen.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to Jerome. Do you want to come in on this?
I want to say something. I think that in my context, career counselors were quite reluctant to move online, but now they are forced to do it, and they observe that it's also a quite interesting tool to give advice and to counsel people. So I think we have many positive aspects to this. But on the other side, we never have to forget that some people of our societies don't have access to internet, have difficulties to have access to internet, and in some other countries, we have much more people. So I think that we need for the future to have a diversity of tools. We need to have digital tools. We need to have also face-to-face interaction, and we also have to have specific interventions for the most vulnerable people. For example, in Switzerland we have like measures for migrants, and this you can never do it per internet. You need the contact. You need to follow them, and you need to follow them for quite long. So I mean, digital tools are very good. They are very useful for many people, but we need a diversity of tools.
If I only made also to add, I'd like to highlight that when we talk about using information and communication technology, let's not forget that it's also something else that doing online. Some countries are making good use of radio, television. So we in Europe sometimes just forget that information and communication technology is more than only digital and online.
Radio is quite powerful in some countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about the idea of we've been calling it sort of integrated guidance, the idea that and using ideas of instructional design, where you're saying really what we're thinking about is what's the right tool. But one of the things that has been really different over the last 6 months is the right tool has often been the internet, whereas it was only sometimes the internet before. Whereas certainly in our country at the moment, we don't have any other choices because everything is so, we can't meet physically and so on. So it has changed us. But thank you for those answers. It's really useful. One of the things that I think Stefan raised on the chat that I wanted to get people's thoughts on, and I think lots of people have touched on it, probably Thomas most, but is the distinction between jobs and work. And the way that that's been described in the chat is that there are activities for which we are paid, and there are other activities for which we're not paid, but they're still worth doing. And that's, many things are work, but only some things are paid work. And I think one of the things that we've seen in the crisis, we've seen a lot of people engaging in voluntary work to help people around them and so on. And we've also seen unemployment rising in many, many countries. So I suppose one of the things I wonder whether people had any reflections on is how should career guidance relate to non-paid work, so voluntary work, community work, civic work? How should it relate to that? And is there something in this distinction that actually helps us think about how we might move forward in terms of rethinking career for the future? Thomas, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would have a lot of thoughts on this, and maybe that would be difficult to formulate it shortly. I think there is this huge informal economy, so care economy, and I also count self-providing to this informal economy. And I think during the crisis, or during the lockdown at least, this informal economy has grown tremendously. And we do not monitor this. And of course, it's a threat, and it's difficult because informal work does not generate state income. You don't pay taxes for informal work, so it's something which is also not so much in focus. But I think it's the time people do not have paid work, that they are doing meaningful things instead is so important for their health also. And to focus especially in times with high unemployment, to focus only on paid work can be very difficult for the clients, and to motivate them also to look for other possibilities to do something meaningful. And these possibilities are huge now, and it really starts with people who begin to breed bees, for example, or to make a permaculture garden, or to help neighbors in renovating their flat, so there are a lot of possibilities to do something meaningful. And I know that this is not the solution at the long term, but it can help to activate people. Last time I was in Czech, I mentioned a project in Lower Austria, the Heidenreich project. It gives the long-term unemployed the possibility to do what they really want to do for about 2 years, I think. They get paid from the unemployment insurance without pushing them to look for jobs. And the result of this project was, the outcome was as good as all the other projects against unemployment. And the health of the people improved in the first 3 months already. So I think these are just things, and that's also the point why I stress that regional development, to look what is the need in a region, and what are the skills of the people, and what are the wishes or to do things for the people, and to bring this together and to look if whether it is economically working sustainably or not. It's important to bring people together and to give them the opportunity to become active. So thanks.
I think that's, I mean, it leads us down lines, public policy sort of lines, where people are talking about things like universal basic income and so on. I mean, in career guidance terms, what strikes me is if I paint my living room, that's not something I would talk about with a career counsellor. If I went round to my friend's house and I painted my friend's living room with him and we had a beer and a pizza afterwards, that's still not something I would talk about with a career counsellor. But if I say I want to be trained to be a house painter and then find a job as a house painter, then that becomes something we talk about in career guidance. But we've had 3 rooms have been decorated through different mechanisms. So should career guidance be talking more broadly about this? Sorry, Thomas, if you want to come in quickly, and then we'll go get some other thoughts from the panel.
Thank you for this point. I ask my clients, what did you do in the last time which was exciting for you? And I really stress to speak with them also from parts of their life which are not related to job. And I think this is so important to open the space also for other experience which are exciting for them, and then to ask them, what was it about this? And it's not that if you paint your own room or you help your friend to paint a room, it's not about becoming a painter, but to see what was great about doing this. And then you get to qualities which are also maybe adaptable to their career.
Great. Thomas, sorry, Jerome, would you like to come in on this?
Very briefly, I just want to mention 2 or 3 things. I agree that it's very important to take into account all the activities you do beside your work. So I mean, all your hobbies and whatever, all the activities you can do. Currently, it's quite difficult to know what is the future of work. So I mean, this means that we need to be able to adapt to any situation in the future. Maybe the number of jobs will decrease, or maybe they will remain stable. It's very difficult to know, and the reports are quite contradictory in this sense. And I also wanted to mention that in some countries, I mean, most of the work is informal. And of course, I mean, in this type of situation, we need to take this into account, and we need to try to develop public policies to regulate this informal work, because I mean, it puts people in very difficult situations in some countries.
Jana, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just one additional point here is there's a good comment from Pauline in that, of course, it's important to take into account, but I also see that it's a good opportunity for individuals, beside doing the voluntary thing, learn some new things, build a networks, build a connections that might be helpful on some point when they might have an interest on learning some professions or apply jobs or find a short-time jobs. So I think it's very important also to raise this when we ask people what they have been doing and what are the voluntary things. And as Jerome said, in future, it might be that certain things what you have been doing in voluntary and what the certain kind of smaller skills, not with the stable that you've educated in, that might be very useful in your CV, or when someone asks you, well, what have you been doing?
Great. Thank you. Jiri, did you want to come in or not? No. Okay. I think we've probably got time for maybe one, possibly even might squeeze in 2 more things. So I thought, Jerome, you raised quite a lot of issues about public policy, really, and about the relationship between some of these big policy issues that are shaping our experience and our careers at the moment and what governments might do about it. And I suppose one of the questions that I've been struggling with, I wonder what your thoughts were, was how much is the pandemic actually going to prove to be an important turning point? Because you remind us that there are all these bigger issues that are going on that in a way the pandemic just plays into. So how important do we think this be? Would we expect to see a different set of career guidance policies, a different set of approaches to career guidance actually emerge out of the pandemic? Or is it really just that you know, it exacerbates and brings our attention to things like precarity and so on that were in the economy already?
Well, it's a difficult question because we are right in the middle of the pandemic, and so it's a little bit difficult to know what will happen later. But I think it's, on one side, I have the feeling that this pandemic indeed increases the inequality. So I mean, this is a fact. It's quite well documented in different countries, and for this reason, this social these policies are very important to try to take these inequalities into account. Is it really a turning point? I don't really know, because some people would say maybe we'll just go back to the usual business after. I'm quite convinced that in the future we will have to face other type of crises. Like, for example, we have the crisis of antibiotics might come, I mean, and which will have an impact on our health, and so I guess I think it's a nice opportunity for our societies and for our field to see how we can be resilient to this. And for this reason, all the things we are trying to do to move on internet, to have new intervention, I think it's very useful, because we will have to face quite difficult challenges in the future. So I would say we need to take this as a time for learning, and a time for developing new things, and also a time where we can maybe be more attentive to the people who are the most vulnerable in our societies.
Any thoughts from the rest of the panel? Is this pandemic going to prove to be a unique and important turning point in our field and in society, or not? JAANA, yes.
Well, time will of course tell, but I'd like to be hopeful that, of course, currently each of the different political sectors are dealing pretty much of the situation, whether it's a health sector, whether it's an education sector, whether it's a labor market sector or ministries. But I'd like to be hopeful and see that when this very acute time goes above, they will actually come together and recognize a little bit more that guidance is one thread that actually goes through all of these sectors and can bring them together, because resources are not growing, and they recognize that with the same amount of money we should support individuals, even people who have lost their jobs, who are having problems and stuff. So I think, and I would like to see that when this acute situation is past, we see policymakers coming together, trying to find new ways to improve and recognize also the importance of career guidance.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? So I've got another issue that's been raised in the chat, which I think we actually didn't really touch upon very strongly in the presentations. And so I wonder whether people have got thoughts on this, which is about skills. I mean, we could add skills and knowledge and attitudes and so on into that. But what is it that people are going to need to know and be able to do going forwards? And Thomas wrote something about creativity as being an important thing, entrepreneurialism. But I suppose from the point of view of career counsellors who are listening, what should be the things that they should be trying to get individuals to develop in order to deal with the challenges that lie ahead? don't know. Thomas, do you want to start us off? Yeah.
Yeah, so difficult to answer this. For me, I don't know, some of you who are watching Germany, I think it's 10 years ago, there was this initiative Ich AG, so that people, unemployed people become entrepreneur as me organizations, as solo organizations. And I thought this wasn't a very good approach, because I don't think that solo ego fighters are what we need in future. And so we created a project, we called it Wir AG, also we association or we firm. And it's 10 years ago, it wasn't possible to realize this project. Maybe now it would be. And I really think it's so important that we bring people together and give them the space to find out what they really want to do, and then to look in the region they live in and to ask what is needed there. And so to create paid or also voluntary work in this region, which improves the social glue and the quality of this region. And I think this is something career guidance is part of working on this kind of projects. I hope I make myself more or less clear.
I think that's a very, very nice place for us to finish, as we're kind of getting towards the end of the session. I mean, I think the point there being that yes, it's important, of course, we need to be thinking about skills with people and developing skills, but we also need to be thinking about networks and relationships, and as somebody in the chat has suggested, values as well. And career guidance needs to be engaging with people, you know, not just technically what do you need to be able to do, but also how do you want to be? How do you want to conduct yourself? What kind of relationships do you want to have? What kind of world do you want to live in? I'd really like to thank the panel. That's been hugely thought-provoking for me. There's been so much for us to think about there. I mean, there's this sort of famous thing, isn't it, that if you get 5 experts in a room, you end up with 6 different opinions. And I think we've demonstrated now that there's a lot to think about. There's a lot that we don't know. But I think what we're absolutely certain about is that the idea of career is a very important thread that will help to take people through this crisis and other crises they might experience. And that career guidance as a field and an activity is going to be important to approaches that countries are going to take, that communities are going to take, and that individuals are going to take towards reconstructing their lives in the aftermath of this crisis. So I think we'll close the session there. I believe we're now moving over to some coffee and so on. And so thank you everyone for listening. I hope there's been lots of thought-provoking ideas in that, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tristram.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all.